Hello! Thank you to everyone for coming out to our group author reading. This reading is brought to you by Strong Women, Strange Worlds, which is a group of authors supporting authors. Our mission is to elevate the voices of women and non-binary authors of science fiction, fantasy, and horror through events like our bi-monthly virtual QuickRead sessions. You can find out more about Strong Women, Strange Worlds in the handout that will be provided in the chat and by visiting our website. This link will also appear in the chat at strongwomenstrangeworlds.weebly.com. I would also like to take a moment to thank those who have made a tip jar donation. Thank you. We appreciate you all so much. I'm your host today, Elaine Isaak, and you can find out more about me in the provided handout as well. Please note that recording this session by the audience is not allowed, and recording of electronic communications, including Zoom meetings and webinars without permission, is illegal. Today, we'll be featuring 5 authors: Leanna Renee Hieber, Anne LeBlanc, Len Klapdor, Casey Grifant, and Lisa Kai. Each author will have 8 minutes to read. Our first reader today is Leanna Renee Hieber. Actress, playwright, ghost tour guide, and author of fiction and nonfiction, Leanna's A Haunted History of Invisible Women, True Stories of America's Ghosts, co-authored with Andrea Janes, was Stoker Award nominated. A Prism Award winner for her gothic, strangely beautiful saga, Leanna has been featured in film and television on shows like Mysteries at the Museum. Leanna Renee, take it away.
Thank you. So I'll be reading my story from the upcoming Castle of Horror anthology, ripped from the headlines, as you can maybe infer from the subtitle. There's a nugget of truth in all of our stories. And so while the ghostly narrator who will be presenting the POV character here, the narrator of this story, is a fictional ghost, the count referred to therein and his actions, it's all a real story. For any unconscionable act of spiritual debasement and corporeal disrespect, there is an equal and appropriate folklore to punish the perpetrator. But the old gods of any country and their various officers cannot be everywhere, and certainly not in each place where a diaspora may scatter. And so it was that Augusta Grunwald, upon her death, volunteered herself as a spiritual representative of the Germanic tribes and watched over the goings-on around the Key West, Florida cemetery to which she had tethered herself. Matron of the grave since her death in 1890, she had decided at the time that rather than passing on, she'd be a better steward if she remained between worlds. Her position wasn't appointed nor elected among the dead, but she accepted the station. It was now the 1930s, and she had no intention of retiring. Her family had been talented arborists for generations. Her people descended from der Schwarzwald, and she prided herself on the fact that the Key West cemetery over which she presided maintained healthy trees and thriving flowers. The atmosphere was quite different here than in the Black Forest. And as the 20th century took a long breath after a terrible war that was hardly great, she was glad that her home country and her adoptive one were no longer, at least for the time, enemies. She found the new century baffling, but she was adapting. Her position had been a peaceful one, a benevolent watch, until the Count came to haunt the grounds. Everything changed once a man claiming a title he did not own nor earn began to lord over the cemetery. Bearded, thin, middle-aged, and walking with effect, the man who dubbed himself Count von Kossel had first entered the gates the night a young woman, much beloved by her Cuban family, was interred in a modest grave. Elena Hoyos was neither this man's bride nor his relative, yet he mourned as though she were his world, his galaxy. His grief seemed to know no bounds. This was Augusta Grunwald's first concern. Mourning was right and proper, but it should have its boundaries. Augusta required details, so she listened in on neighborhood gossip. Only 22, one neighbor clucked her tongue. So young, tuberculosis has no mercy. Who is this Count von Kossel? Another neighbor asked one of the hospital orderlies who attended the funeral. The radiologist who treated her, the young man replied quietly. His real name is Karl Tanzler from Dresden. He's been in Key West for many years, acting like he's here on some sort of mission. When Elena Hoyos entered his X-ray room, he was a goner, went mad for her. A Hoyos relative joined in, quietly eyeing Tanzler with unease. His methods went above and beyond, bringing equipment into her house, strange devices, demanding that all her parents, all of us comply with his orders. Unnatural. Two immigrants from different backgrounds, patient and doctor, both trying to fend off death unsuccessfully. Elena was a beautiful woman, charming too. Augusta could understand anyone being taken with her. The young woman's ghost, luminous and slightly transparent, floated by. Elena's spirit was making her rounds. Augusta had seen similar patterns unfold. The spirit may stare in wonder at the procession to the gravesite, gazing down at a casket with contemplative mien before turning to behold family. Elena did this precisely, but then with furrowed brow looked at the man who had treated her in the hospital. She shook her head, puzzled, before floating back towards the hedgerow where Augusta watched. Elena's spirit did not speak with the living. Perhaps she'd already tried, and this was one of her last rounds of goodbyes before she would go on towards her new adventures. Augusta knew the time might come when she too would go onwards unto mystery, but for now she had a job to do. Few people actually haunted their graves. Most haunted their haunts in life, the word haunt being suitable for the living and dead alike. Some might watch the sending off of their corporeal shell for their own closure. Others might be focused on friends and family, following and floating companionship to now and then smile when they were mentioned or glimpsed with slight hope out of the corner of a living eye. They'd acknowledged their resting place, but knew it was, as they were now, mere memory. Elena noticed Augusta's silvery figure floating next to the oldest cypress tree in the cemetery, and the young woman smiled at the elder shyly. Augusta lifted a hand in greeting. Not all dead wanted to speak to one another. Augusta always let the fresher ghost set the tone. "How long will I remain so?" the young woman asked quietly, floating finally free from pain. "As long as you wish," Augusta replied. "If you concentrate hard to remain, but you do not have to. I stay because I enjoy greeting fellow travelers and watching over the stones, helping to keep order. What would make you happiest? Go and do that until your soul is so weightless that you float into eternal bliss." In the distance, a radio dial was turned higher. A bolero carried softly across the verdant grass. Elena turned towards the rich, lush sound, opening her arms slightly as if hoping to embrace the music. It was a sweetly sweeping Spanish-language tune, and the new ghost swayed gracefully in time with the music. "I'd dance and sing forever if I could. That's what I've missed most." "Then you should," Augusta encouraged. "Every spirit should follow their passion until the great light calls you onward." The young woman brightened. Her smile widened as if someone had turned the key to a gas lamp higher, and the flame of her spirit grew taller in the lantern. Most spirits craved guidance, permission. They were confused about what they were supposed to do if they found themselves still on this earthly plane. Because Elena had so missed activities of her healthier body, her spirit wanted one last dance, or many more. These simple delights could be held on to for as long as the spirit wished. Elena's ghost waved at Augusta as she floated towards the music. One of the town's lively dance halls wasn't far, and Augusta hoped the familiarity of music and movement would transform the last physical memories of suffering into the transcendence that only leaving a body behind could offer. While Elena moved on, friends and family exited the cemetery. The interring had long finished, but Augusta watched as the man who dubbed himself Count remained. He had commandeered a chair from the service and sat by the headstone, speaking quietly to the grave. It was no use trying to tell someone that their loved one wasn't there below the ground listening. Talking, even in abstract, to the loss itself was a critical part of the living's process. She let it be. The one-sided discussion continued until it began to rain. Eventually, the downpour made him give up. But night after night, he returned to mourn, sitting and murmuring to the ground. Augusta found it odd, as no other family members were keeping such consistent vigil. As the self-appointed count examined the saturated terrain, he began to fret over the continuing storms. Rushing out of the gates, propelled by what seemed to be a surge of determination, Augusta realized something far more complicated was afoot. The count, along with a joyous relative, returned, accompanied by grave diggers who began disinterring Elena's grave. If the cemetery sexton hadn't been with them, Augusta would have raised an alarm, creating as many sounds and moving things around the living that would frighten them away from their grim task. She'd foiled a few grave robberies in just such a manner, but this seemed sanctioned, however unorthodox. The young woman's damaged coffin was divulged, then hauled off by a distraught Tansler. The ground around it gave way, leaving a wet, gaping mouth behind. Unsure what to think until a mausoleum began to be built in its place, Augusta watched in fascination as the arched white stone sepulchre took shape. The count spared no expense. While Elena's name was prominently prominently displayed on the exterior. Her body had also been freshly dressed and placed into a new layered casket on a dais within, with a surrounding chamber large enough for a visitor to sit inside. The door was solid metal, fitted with several locks to which Tansler had the only key, having assigned himself her guardian, and now that her body was no longer subjected to further deterioration in the muddy ground below, he then became her suitor. Thank you. You can read the rest of it in the anthology.
Wow, that was a fantastic reading. Great passage and so lively for a story about dead people. Quite remarkable. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Our second reader today is Anne LeBlanc. Anne LeBlanc, and there she is. Anne LeBlanc is a writer, editor, and woodworker. Her debut novella, The Transitive Properties of Cheese, is a cyberpunk cheese heist, published by Neon Hemlock. Her short fiction has been published in Strange Horizons, Clarkesworld Magazine, Escape Pod, and Baffling Magazine. Anne, over to you.
Hello. So today I'm going to be reading from the Little Free Guide to Drone Watching, Abridged and Annotated, which originally was published in Baffling Magazine. You were the one who watched the drones, not me. You, with those too expensive binoculars, out alone at dusk, watching their wheeling fractal advertisements against the electric blue sky. I'd wait so I could catch a remnant of your smile. Now I'm the one who sits alone, whose eyes strain to catch a glimpse of swift sure movement. I'm still waiting for you. Chapter 1. History. In response to the hack, Congress could only imagine a punitive solution. The Feral Drone Remediation Act passed unanimously. Now it's open season on all drones affected by the Miller-Tsuki virus. Aiding them is a felony. I spotted a whole flock today. Delivery drones, orange paint scuffed and faded, murmurating inscrutable messages against the clouds. I ran out to them, out to the picnic meadow where we had our third date. You were so tongue-tied, so sure I would laugh in your face, as if I wasn't fear-desperate for you to love me. A few of the drones broke off from the swarm, queuing politely to sip at your charging station. Each one thanked me with stock phrases from their former jobs like, "Thank you for being a premium platinum customer." Each one I'd thank back, "Thank you for surviving." Chapter 9. Ethics. It doesn't actually matter whether the MT virus gave the drones intelligence along with freedom. The endless discourse, the detailed analysis of their behaviors, the clues ripped from the guts of dissected drones, and a big fuck you to the people involved in that scene. None of it matters. Are the drones an insectile hive intelligence? Scripted machines? Punk performance art? Who cares? We must resist the essential human urge to categorize. Whatever they turn out to be, we as drone watchers make this promise, to keep the miracle going. Do you remember our last conversation, when you called me a coward? I was so mad at you. I wanted you to stay safe up in the mountains, cozy in our cabin. Wasn't our survival, our love, enough resistance against a world that can't imagine queer joy? But you chafed at the cage safety made of our home. You went down to the mountain, to your mutual aid meetup, passing out bootleg HRT and illegal charging stations. My anger turns to panic when the police raid appeared on the newsfeed and your name was among the arrested. And now, after months all alone, the part of me that's still angry and newly brave wishes I'd gone with you. At least then I could have said, "I love you," one last time. But you were right, I'm too much of a coward to do anything but wait on my mountain, missing you. Chapter 4. Tracking. It's pointless to argue whether RFID is better than QR codes for tracking. Standardization is a double-edged sword. It will slice you open as easily as it optimizes efficiency. Any tag and track system we make standard will be co-opted to capture or kill free drones. Let's keep our mishmash patchwork, keep ourselves inscrutable and inefficient. Visibility is a trap. Sometimes I wonder if your prison cell has a window. Do you watch the same drones I do? I hope so. I can't bear the thought of you alone. It bothers me that they fly free while you're trapped. I never loved them like you do. Yes, they're beautiful, but they don't suffer like you do, like I do. Even when their batteries run low, they don't feel powerless like I do, like you do. I climbed up to the ridgetop last night, watched them flying into the moon-clad night. They're migrating, like birds, fleeing the wildfires out west, carrying soot-blackened packages from ruined warehouses in their untiring claws. They leave presents on the cabin porch, food, books, toilet paper. What's going on out there? I'm too afraid to use the internet. Instead, I read augury in the flocking of the drones. Chapter 10, Fear. The way people talk about their fear, the way they glance at the sky, reminds me of my mother's terror of the bears that lived in the forest behind our house. The bears don't want to be a danger. They want to be left alone. I made a friend, a drone who stayed behind. She loops above the cabin like a fat, orange-striped bee. At first, I was terrified she was virus immune, here to tell the cops about the drone helper hiding alone. But my friend keeps my secrets. She listens to me, shares my electricity, tilts her body up to expose her data port. A sign of trust, or an invitation, perhaps? Speaking of secrets, I found the box you hid behind the cleaning supplies. I opened it, saw the engagement ring. Were you going to... On days when I don't go out, when the weather is too rough for drones or my fear of spying eyes overwhelms me, I like to read the guide you wrote. I hold the paper version, press my nose between the pages where some of your smell still lingers. The drones are doing new things, things not in the guide. My friend has been moving pine cones, making neat piles around the cabin. I've been talking to her, or trying to, through her data port. I have an idea, but I'm not sure I'm brave enough to do it. Chapter 6, Help. Some argue that the drones should survive on their own, but humans aren't meant to survive divorced from the help and hope and love of others, and neither are the drones. We must reject calls for self-sufficiency, self-care, and self-actualization. We help the drones, but we have to help each other too. I've uploaded a copy of your guide, my drone friend, I've uploaded a copy of your guide to my drone friend, along with my own annotations. And even though it might help the cops find me, I've asked her to share it widely amongst her peers. The world will hear your words, and mine, broadcast from a million airborne voices. But I'm recording this message for you, my love. If you can see the drones, if you can hear them, they'll tell you that you aren't alone. The drones still fly free. I still fly free. And to answer the question you never had the chance to ask, I will. I do. I love you. I dedicate this guide to my girlfriend, whose love gave me something to live for, to fight for, and to hope for. I love you. And that's the end. So that was originally published in Baffling Magazine. If you want some more of my cyberpunk writing, I have a novella out from Neon Hemlock, The Transitive Properties of Cheese, which is a cyberpunk cheese heist. So if you like good food and cheese, you should pick it up. Thank you.
That was marvelous. You'll have to go back and read the comments as people were responding to that little story. And transitive properties of cheese definitely sounds pretty fascinating, although you're making me hungry and I haven't had lunch yet. All right, must be time to go on to our third reader today. Our third reader is Len Klapdor. Len Klapdor is a writer from the sprawling, multicentric Ruhr region. Enthralled with the art of storytelling from a young age, she has written dozens of stories and worked as a story developer for games and theater projects. Her writing is characterized by a search for the difficult questions and often gravitates toward horror. Len, over to you.
Thank you very much. I will be reading the beginning of my short story, Aether's Daughters, which was published this spring by the wonderful Solarpunk magazine. And if I slip into the 90s villain accent of a German person trying to speak English, I hope you will excuse me. Thanks a lot. Dried out root pieces cracked beneath her boots as Tikkalith swiftly moved through the underbrush to find her favorite tree. It was an old dead oak, large and thick enough to support her weight, even in its crumbling state. She climbed a boulder and jumped up from its top to reach a lower branch, then hoisted herself up and sat, leaning against the trunk. From here, she had a splendid view of Turnus Island, set square in the middle between the coasts of Sika in the northeast and Noksha in the southwest. The island was a collection of rocks and boulders held together by patches of loamy ground and the tenacious spider trees, whose dead grey roots clung to rock and earth like threads of a web. Tikkalith let her eyes roam the horizon and froze when she spotted a ship approaching from the north. It was a small sailer, its sails indistinguishable in color due to the heavy clouds that blocked out the sunlight. A colonist ship, maybe? Sika hadn't sent those in a while. Deserters were more likely, bent from home and desperate. But when wind came up and parted the clouds, the ship's billowing sails shone in the silvery light. They were dyed in the dark red of the royal family. Fuck, said Tikkalith. The royal party consisted of 3 women, which surprised Tikkalith at first. She'd thought the royals didn't let their women go anywhere without an adult male relative. She figured that at least one of the women must have been more royal than the others. A princess, most likely. Those usually enjoyed greater freedoms. And if one was a princess, the other two were likely handmaidens, so-called lower branch daughters, who were supposed to use the time at court to secure a husband from a higher branch, thereby elevating their own and their offspring's status. But what were they doing here? Turnus Island certainly had no husbands to offer. Tikkalith mulled this over as she watched them make camp at the foot of a steep cliff that separated the beach from forest. When they started collecting dried branches for a fire, Tikkalith groaned internally. Making fire meant drawing attention, which in turn meant that Tikkalith would not sleep. She had to make sure they were safe until she figured out how to approach this princess. If Tikkalith played her cards right, this inconvenience might be transformed into a unique opportunity. Tikkalith found another oak near the edge of the cliff above the camp and climbed up into its fading crown. She had barely made herself comfortable when footsteps crunched in the underbrush near her. "Are you just a snoop or a thief?" came a voice from below. A woman in a fine woolen traveling cape stood at the foot of the tree. How did she get here without Tikkalith noticing? "You dishonor me, princess. I am neither one nor the other." Tikkalith didn't need to see the prince's eyes widen. The gasp of surprise was all she needed to hear. "How did you know who I am?" Tikkalith chuckled, then swung down from the tree. She landed on her feet and approached the princess. It was only now that Tikkalith took in her features. The princess' gold-bronze skin fit in well with her round green eyes and black-brown hair. She was as delicate as one might think a princess, but Tikkalith knew better than to mistake delicacy for weakness. The princess was certainly cautious. She took a step back when Tikkalith let herself fall from the tree, and now her feet were slightly spread and her knees were bent, ready for fight or flight. It was only then Tikkalith realized how she towered over the other woman, and it irked her how she might be scaring the princess. She retreated a step and indicated a bow. Forgive my rudeness. I am Tikkalith of the Spider Forest. It is an honor to meet you, Princess Berenice. The princess looked flabbergasted, but collected herself and indicated her own little bow. Thank you, Tikkalith of the Spider Forest. The honor is all mine. And forgive me for accusing you. I really only wanted your attention and didn't know how to go about it. Tikkalith wanted to say something to that unexpected honesty, but screams interrupted the moment. Now they both froze on the spot and listened. She heard blades crashing and exchanged a worried look with Berenice. They set into motion simultaneously and raced back to the prince's camp. The attackers looked miserable. Their thin bodies bore the signs of malnourishment, their hooded faces gaunt and hopeless. The handmaidens did what they could to keep them at bay, but they were outnumbered. Tikkalith grunted in frustration while she unsheathed her short sword. Defending against a large force while restraining herself from wounding any of them mortally was a hard task, even for someone who was used to that challenge. Tikkalith knocked swords from hands and sent attackers down with a hit of the broad side of the blade as much as she could, but that wasn't enough to demoralize and disperse them, so other measures became necessary. The attackers pinned the four women in a half circle, but before they could attack, Tikkalith stepped forward and spoke up. You don't want to do this. What do you know, Gorger? Was the scowling answer. Tikkalith pushed back her hood, locked eyes with the speaker, took a deep breath, and screamed. Her jaw unhinged and her mouth opened so wide the gaping hole became as big as her whole face. Rows of sharp, triangular teeth popped up at the edges. The attackers stood silent and motionless for a split second, then turned on their heels and ran. Tikkalith folded her jaw back and looked at the remaining women who had become as three ice stages, staring at her in a mix of fear, disbelief, and bedazzlement. The Queen of Sharks, said the princess in a toneless voice. Tikkalith tilted her head. Sharks have no queen. Thank you.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much. Sharks have no queen. Then who is she? Now I'm desperate to find out more, and you can too. Don't forget to grab that handout that will have more information, and definitely check out Len's website to find out more about her fiction overall. Our fourth reader today is K.C. Grifant. K.C. Grifant is an award-winning Southern California author who writes horror, fantasy, science fiction, and Weird West stories, published in podcasts, Stoker-nominated anthologies, and magazines. She is the author of the Monster Gunslinger series and shrouded horror, Tales of the Uncanny. She is also editor of Women of the Weird West. K.C., take it away.
Thank you. I'll be reading from Melinda West and the Gremlin Queen, upcoming book. It's book 2 in a standalone interconnected supernatural Western series where stoic sharpshooter Melinda West and her easygoing partner Lance make a living hunting monsters that threaten towns and tribes in the Old West. In this book, they're hunting a swarm of gremlins that use human bodies to lay their eggs. We're going to start a little bit in the book where they've been tracking one monster. The screams and gunshots grew louder as Melinda and Lance rode south through Thundering Ridge, dodging pedestrians who stopped in confusion. The south field came into sight along with the flapping of torn tents. The horses slowed at the destroyed ground that met them at the edge of the street. They picked their way past fresh ditches while a handful of people ran by with screams. 3 Grems popped out of the dirt amidst a spray of rocks. They were 3 feet tall and humanoid. Their white faces, tinged with scraggly blue fur, were the size of a piglet's, squashed like a stomped-on rat. Red-rimmed white eyes with dotted pupils blinked as they shook off dirt. Melinda and Lance's gunshots rang out, sending the creatures falling backwards. Melinda and Lance dismounted and came to one fallen body. The figure, nearly unidentifiable as human, was torn to pieces, with a chest open like a crater. But rather than a hole in the dirt, this was a hole in the flesh. And in that flesh, a Grem had climbed in, bathing in the guts. She heard someone heave behind her. "Kill as many of the Grems as you can," Lance commanded to the townspeople. "They're fast and strong, but not immune to bullets." A Grem burrowed up from the packed dirt next to them, clawing its way out of the ground with a snarl. Melinda waited until its head, about the size of her fist, had fully emerged before she shot it. The whitish-blue head lolled back, brown blood spilling from the holes in its cheeks. Other Grems were already upon the bodies. One the size of a tomcat in front of them hissed, its mouth full of more teeth than any creature on this earth needed. It leapt onto a man who lay unconscious. Before they could shoot it, it tore into his torso as if it was no more than parchment paper. It wiggled half its body inside as the man's chest began to cave in. They shot and shot again until the Grem inside stopped moving. Lance fell in line next to her, and they fired in unison, separating and drawing together as they picked off the Grems one by one. Melinda turned to see a smaller Grem the size of a prairie dog wiggling in a freshly bleeding corpse. She reeled at the horrific sight, but her senses snapped together, everything getting slow and sharp around her as she shot one gremlin here, another there. The bullets blasted through the stiff monster bodies, sending them staggering just as they burst from the ground. With each shot, she felt lighter, the rush of adrenaline keeping her focused. She never missed her mark. This is what she was good at, what she was born to do. She continued to shoot, reload, shoot. More Grems started moving with purpose now, ignoring the bodies. "Eyes up," Melinda said, and Lance stiffened next to her, undoubtedly noticing the same thing. They were making a circle around Lance and Melinda, acting intelligently and moving together. They had figured out their biggest threat, Melinda and Lance, and now we're going to do something about it. The pair backed up as more Grems popped out of the dirt. "There's too many, we're outnumbered." Lance grabbed her arm. His gaze bore into her, the same worried look he gave her each night when she woke up half screaming from her dreams. She shook her head. "We can't leave. We've got to make sure every single one is dead, so they can't keep breeding." Part of monster hunting was knowing when to cut their losses and surrender, at least temporarily. It was how they had survived for so long. But as the screams continued, she saw grim agreement in his face despite their odds. They weren't going anywhere. "We need a plan," he said, as they kept backing up from nearly a dozen blood-stained Grems. "Almost out of bullets," she said. "We have the crossbow and dynamite, then we're out," he said. "Slim arsenal," she replied. "We have to figure out their pattern. They're using bodies to lay eggs like reptiles, but they look like mammals and move like..." "They're moving in a swarm," Lance said, "like an ant colony, which means..." "There may be a leader," Melinda finished. She fired off 2 shots as the Grems kept pressing them backwards against one of the few giant tents. "A queen bee," he said. "We have to find it. We get it, maybe the swarm disperses, and then we can pick them off." "Take this." Lance gave her the stick of dynamite and matchbook from his bag. "It should do a number." He lifted the crossbow, drew the string, and hit the trigger. Dozens of barbed arrows flew out with his shot, hitting at least 6 Grems. In between his shots, Melinda ran with the dynamite, dodging claws as she neared the highest concentration of Grems ahead of them. The Grems snarled around her, a sound like a hissing between chattering teeth as more popped out of the ground. A gaping mouth nearly took off a chunk of her arm before Lance's arrows hit a new batch, clearing the way for her. One miss, and she'd be done. The bullets and arrows were slowing them, but not taking them down nearly as fast as she hoped. She kept moving, dodging 2 Grems that attacked in a coordinated effort, much more sophisticated than she was used to from monsters. They were adapting their fighting style to Melinda's attacks and closing in. "Look!" The single hollered word from Lance shot a spike of dread through her, and she turned. Something large loomed behind the snarling Grems and smoke. There it was, the bigger Grem, their leader. Melinda gasped at its size. The Grem leader sat, twice as large as the others, nearly as tall as a human, with bands of white around her limbs. Folded up ears framed a squashed face and nose, and its open mouth showed rows of crooked gray teeth. The creature squatted on a wagon about 50 yards away, watching the scene. The sight sent a primal fear through Melinda that she thought she had mastered long ago, only to come back full force now. The urge to flee. She mustered every ounce of resolve to keep her feet rooted. We've killed most of your swarm, Melinda said to it. You're dead meat. Part of a torn canvas tent had wrapped around the large grem, nearly giving it the illusion of a cape. It stared coldly at Melinda, teeth clicking. Cocky, aren't you? Melinda moved closer to it, firing at a handful of grems with her gun, but never letting the leader out of her sight. When she was in throwing distance, she holstered her gun and took out the stick of dynamite. A trio of grems jumped in front of Melinda and moved in systematically, as if they knew, as if they were blocking her, protecting their leader. Melly, there's too many, Lance hollered from somewhere outside the swarm. They were outnumbered, and her odds of success were dropping by the second. But the leader was there, a mark she could not pass up, so she pressed deeper into the horde. She wouldn't let the leader get away and take the swarm to another town and kill how many more people. Cover me, she shouted to Lance. Get out of there, Lance yelled back, and she understood that he couldn't cover her anymore. We'll find another way. But she couldn't stop now. The Grem leader smirked at her from its perch on the wagon, a smile that seemed to drink in the pain around them. Rage boiled under Melinda's skin. Smile all you want, Melinda said, striking a match to light the dynamite. We've wiped out plenty of other monsters. You're no different. She tossed the dynamite stick toward the leader. 5 seconds to detonation, and then she'd watch the monster's guts splatter the sky like painted fireworks. Until a hand reached out, catching the dynamite. A Grem hand. 3 seconds. She knew what was coming. She turned to run before seeing the Grem hurl the dynamite back at her. 2 seconds. She leapt. Thank you. There's a giveaway of this arc in the forum, and it's currently available for pre-order for 99 cents if you want the official version.
Wow, way to leave us hanging right in the air, just as the explosion happens. Feels like we're in the theater and that's one of those, cliffhangers, and we have to wait until next week and go see the next movie to see what's going to happen. But fortunately for you, you can enter the giveaway or grab the pre-order. Good stuff. Thank you so much. Our final reader today is Lisa Kai. Lisa Kai is from Toronto, Canada. She has been published in Diabolical Plots, The Dark, and others. When not reading or writing, she is probably wrangling with IT at a university, watching anime, taking a long walk, or solving crimes in Among Us. Lisa, over to you.
Yes, thanks for that intro, Elaine. So I will be reading from the Over the Rainbow anthology. I will be reading from my short story, Unearthing History. A flying three-legged crow can see everything in Toronto. Tonight, Cindy observed the houses below her. When she flew out of her apartment, she left an area dotted with construction and congested traffic. As she neared her destination, the houses grew larger, the front yards wider, gardens became elaborate works, and private pools and tennis courts dotted the backyards. She was flying over an unfamiliar Toronto, yet she was still within North York. She circled above a house. Cindy wasn't worried about losing her way. The house under her was the most brightly lit in its neighborhood. The wind was just a gentle touch against her feathers. She hoped tonight's events would be as calm as the rest of the world. Cindy spotted a figure standing on the sidewalk. It had to be Rochelle. Cindy adjusted her wings and tail. She descended and landed on the road. Rochelle put her phone in her purse. She stepped toward Cindy. You're late, you know. She crossed her arms. The crow turned her head away from her captain. Cindy thought she had timed her trip right, but she was wrong. Since she already landed, she couldn't leave now. The crow started to grow. The feathers receded into her skin, revealing her white dress shirt and black pants. The wings changed to arms, and the skinny crow feet turned to human legs. Cindy stood up straight. She was herself again. I'm sorry. Cindy stared down at her shoes. I thought I'd be here on time. Rochelle also looked down at Cindy's footwear. She was wearing black running shoes at a gathering of the most elite and important dignitaries of their society. Rochelle tissed. She had been in Cindy's apartment before and knew about what she possessed. Cindy could only afford to own 3 worn pairs of shoes. Couldn't Cindy have attempted to dress for the occasion and try to represent her division well? Rochelle's only hope was that no one would notice Cindy's blunder. Nothing could be done now. They would have to face the others in their current state. Just follow me. Rochelle walked towards the mansion. They saw a man standing by the front door. He had been staring at Rochelle since she stood on the sidewalk. Ah, so you really are a guest. He thought Rochelle was some kind of loiterer, but seeing Cindy turn into a human was proof enough that they belonged to this gathering. Cindy dug into her pocket and withdrew an invitation letter. She handed the paper to the man. He unfolded the paper and looked over the names. Representing the Department of Supernatural Affairs, Defense Division of Toronto, Rochelle Henry, a priestess, and Cindy Wu, the Samjuk Wu, Cindy said. He frowned but said nothing. What was the point of using a word that had no meaning to him? He supposed that the Samjuk Wu described whatever Cindy was. He folded the paper. Please, go inside and enjoy yourselves. They thanked him and walked into the house. Cindy's eyes widened when she saw the interior of the mansion. Above the guests were glowing fairies of various sizes. They floated about, singing and playing amongst one another. The walls had portraits of fairies that resembled adult humans clothed with medieval attire. This really was the residence of a fairy queen. Rochelle expected Cindy to stare, as it was her first time attending such a gathering. Don't stand in front of the door, Rochelle said. We need to find our room. Rochelle made her way down one hall, and Cindy followed. She had heard that a choir of sirens were going to sing here, but she guessed they were too late for such a performance. By the way, is anyone else we know coming? Rochelle shook her head. She had hoped that others could make it to support her, but that was asking too much. They passed by a suited werewolf. I got a text from Pablo. He can't come. He was vomiting blood earlier today. Didn't you get any messages? Oh, no, I hadn't checked. Cindy looked away from Rochelle. The truth was, she hadn't paid her phone bill on time. She couldn't afford it. Vampirehood is difficult when your human side can't adjust to drinking blood, Rochelle sighed. The younger members of her squad always gave her the worst trouble, especially Cindy and Pablo. Here's the room. Rochelle pointed to her right. They entered the room. It was near fully seated. Most of the people were already finished their meals. Some of the guests turned to look at them. Cindy felt self-conscious looking at the others' fine clothes and jewelry. She stared at Rochelle's back. Rochelle looked around. She didn't see any faces from the defense division. She spotted a small, unoccupied square table at the back of the room. It was under a poorly lit ceiling. A laugh almost escaped Rochelle's mouth. Things hadn't changed since these gatherings began. Rochelle gestured to Cindy to follow. They walked to the table together and sat down. A fairy landed on their table. Mrs. I'll summon food and drink for you. Thanks, Rochelle said. The fairy nodded. Cindy watched the fairy fly away. Her blonde hair left a trail of gold sparkles behind her. It was the first time Cindy had seen a fairy up close. All of them reminded her of the fairies she had seen in childhood picture books. Rochelle leaned against her chair. She needed a drink or a cigarette. She was in a fairy queen's home, chaperoning Cindy and representing the whole defense division. She was in her own personal hell. Things got worse as she heard fairies singing outside the room. Everyone in the room, except for Cindy and Rochelle, turned towards the entrance and started clapping. Rochelle cursed, but clapped her hands. Cindy followed her captain, even though she was confused about why she had to applaud. A procession of fairies entered the room. They held up ancient banners or played an instrument. Our queen has arrived! Matilda, the fairy queen, made her way to the stage. Her gold dress was a finely detailed, flowing, and gorgeous as always. Her Elizabethan-style dress clearly stated her authority among the supernatural of this country. Matilda turned towards the attendees. My good people, welcome to this grand event. Tonight, we acknowledge the accomplishments of the Department of Supernatural Affairs in Canada. 2 glasses of water and plates of food floated down to Rochelle and Cindy's table. Rochelle helped herself to the water and food. Cindy drank from her cup. This was the first time Cindy saw Matilda, and she wanted to remember her words. I established this department in 1912 to address the concerns about foreign and native creatures endangering our beloved land. We have continuously vanquished all threats, immense and minuscule, and have maintained authority over our borders. Cindy coughed. She put a hand over her mouth. Matilda was speaking nonsense. The account she described about the founding of the department was much different from what Rochelle had told Cindy. And if you're interested in finding why there is a discrepancy in this history, feel free to check out the Over the Rainbow anthology.
What a great reading. I love that setting and getting little snippets of different characters from different mythologies working together, or perhaps not so effectively. It sounds like a fascinating milieu. Thank you so much. And this is the moment where I thank everybody who came out and joined us for the reading today. We really appreciate you coming out to listen.